tonight. Reaction after a CBC investigation reveals the claims of Indigenous ancestry of one of Canada's highest profile judges do not appear to be supported by documentation. Also, financial relief. The province announces it will help people pay for Cochlear implant device replacements effective December 1st.
The box reading that we use is 4 different parts.
Plus, students at a Regina school get a mental health pep talk from some of the Saskatchewan Roughriders' finest.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It is Thursday, October 13th, and the CBC Saskatchewan News starts right now. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Words of disbelief, anger, but also support are pouring in about Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafon's refusal to provide evidence of her claims to be Indigenous. Last night, we brought you a CBC News investigation into the former scholar and judge. Turpel-Lafon has claimed she is a Treaty Indian of Cree ancestry, but her claims don't appear to match the historical record. She says that's nobody's business. Sam Sampson walks us through the mixed response and what happens next in the conversation about Indigenous identity.
A scholar, judge, advocate.
I want to tell you why I feel this agreement is very important for the Aboriginal peoples of Canada.
Now at the centre of controversy, Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafon's own Indigenous background up for debate after a CBC investigation. Turpel-Lafon says she is a Treaty Indian, that her father was Cree, but historical records indicate her father was born to a white European couple.
It's everything from hurt and feeling, betrayed to questioning.
Métis lawyer and advocate Jean Théier has written on Indigenous identity, spoken at conferences, and had been hired by institutions to delve into others' backgrounds.
They are taking the space up that was meant for Indigenous people. Could they have done this excellent work without taking on red face? Absolutely.
Turpel-Lafon has been accepted as a member of Muskeg Lake Cree Nation, her husband's First Nation in Saskatchewan, for almost 30 years. But Théier says membership is different from being biologically Indigenous.
You don't necessarily have to have Indigenous ancestry if the rules of the nation will accept you without that, okay? So let's put that aside. You can be a member. That doesn't mean you're Indigenous, though. It just means you're a member of that First Nation. You could be a white woman who marries an Indigenous man.
Those who stand behind Turpel-Lafon are standing strong. The Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, the Saskatoon Tribal Council, the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. Many say it's not for the media, government, or anyone other than Indigenous people to determine who belongs.
We have the highest regard for Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafon. She's an amazing, brilliant woman who has accomplished an enormous amount in regard to her own personal journey. But more importantly, she has made absolutely stunning contributions to the advancement of all Indigenous peoples in this country, children and families, missing and murdered Indigenous women, youth issues, and so on and so forth. And we value her based on her work and her results, and we'll continue the relationship.
Some universities are working on or already have policies to avoid any doubt. The University of British Columbia, which employed Turpel-Lafon, says it relies on self-declaration. Some say while there are nuances for people who are not status, the way forward is verifying identity.
Can't open a bank account without an ID. You can't do anything. You can't get employed without showing the university your ID. They want my social insurance number. I mean, why not? Does Indigenous governance not matter? Does it not count?
Turpel-Lafon declined an interview. She says CBC's questions about her ancestry are offensive and an invasion of her privacy. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Regina.
When Premier Scott Moe released his white paper this week, he said the provincial government has exclusive jurisdiction over natural resources. Moe made no mention of First Nations rights or history. The head of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations says that is a mistake. He says the courts have repeatedly ruled that First Nations must be consulted and accommodated when dealing with natural resources and revenue plans, and that didn't happen.
You know, we just celebrated September 30th. Every child that is should take, right? And again, what's reconciliation when they keep excluding First Nation people?
Mo released the white paper during a speech to a North Battleford business audience on Tuesday. He says the provincial government is ready to fight the federal government in court on natural resource issues. Speaking to reporters yesterday, Mo says he and his government have spoken to a wide variety of citizens individually about this issue. He says some of them are Indigenous and some are not. Poundmaker Cree Nation is leaving the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations. Councillor Brian Tatusis says the band is not getting what it needs from the FSIN. Tatusis says they have been having conversations about leaving the FSIN for a long time. He says the move is related to a perceived lack of support and resources and about looking out for future generations. Tatusis says Poundmaker will deal with the federal government on a nation-to-nation basis when it comes to treaty rights.
The overall needs of our people is so important when we talk about education, when we talk about health, we talk about housing, we talk about infrastructure, roads, food sovereignty, sicknesses and health and so forth. FSIN is nowhere in sight.
Councillor Tatusis says it was a tough but necessary decision for the First Nation that's situated about 225 kilometers northwest of Saskatoon. He says the decision was not meant to be disrespectful and that a letter informing the FSIN was delivered yesterday. The FSIN has not responded to requests for comment about the departure. Meanwhile, Whitecap Dakota First Nation is writing history. Members of the community voted to become the first self-governing Indigenous nation in Saskatchewan. That means they will no longer be under the control of the federal government's Indian Act, and the nation will have more lawmaking powers.
We're not there yet as far as effective date. Now what has to happen, so our membership has ratified the self-government agreement. It now has to go for cabinet approval of our governance agreement. And then the minister and myself and my council will sign that off. Then it goes back for federal legislation. So it eventually becomes an act, and that'll be effective September 1 of 2023. That's the goal.
Whitecap Dakota joins 78 other First Nations who've signed self-government or education agreements across the country. It is day one of the public inquiry into the Federal Emergencies Act invoked on February 14th. It looks into the events involving the protest convoy that brought downtown Ottawa to a standstill for weeks. Rafi Boudjikanian has the details from opening day.
Ottawa police moving in after 3 weeks of little action, putting an end to the blockades and protests on Parliament Hill in February, but the invoking of the act also triggered important questions.
The exceptional powers given to it by the Emergencies Act affects directly or indirectly all Canadians. How and why the powers in the act were invoked are matters of great public interest.
And on this point, already battle lines have been drawn. Provinces like Alberta pointing out authorities stopped a border crossing blockade there without extra legislation.
None of the powers that were created under the Federal Emergencies Act were necessary, nor were any of them used in Alberta to resolve the Coots blockade.
The Emergencies Act requires several things. One, it could be invoked due to espionage and sabotage. Are you going to hear any evidence about espionage and sabotage? The answer to that is no. It also could be invoked on the basis of threats or use of acts of serious violence against persons or property. Are you going to hear evidence of violence against persons or property? The answer is no.
We knew from the very beginning that invoking the Emergencies Act is a big step. It had never been done before, but given these unprecedented illegal protests, we needed to take action.
Open publicly, the commission attracted few curious onlookers today, though they did include convoy organizer Tamara Leach.
What do you think of the use of the emergency powers?
I'm not going to comment on that right now.
As one of 65 anticipated witnesses, Leach will have less of a choice once she takes the stand. The Prime Minister and 7 members of his cabinet are expected to testify as well, and the Commission says it will produce thousands of documents in the next 6 weeks. All this as it expects to wrap up its work next February. The Commissioner already hinting today that's a tall order for a tight timeline. Rafi Bujikani on CBC News, Ottawa.
This fall, the Saskatchewan government will kick off a copay model for the Cochlear implant program. This will help residents who need to replace their hearing devices. A cochlear implant is an internal device that helps restore hearing, but they need to be replaced every few years, and that can cost up to $12,000. The province pays for the initial device and surgery, but not future updates, and soon that will change. A new plan will allow residents to copay $840 for each new device, while the government pays the rest. This is a huge relief for Rod Rossmo, who's clinically deaf and uses cochlear implants to hear.
Many families, many cochlear recipients and their families are going to be celebratory today and extremely relieved with this news to provide continuous service to maintain two precious gifts, the gifts of sound and the gift of peace and security.
Rossmo has been lobbying the government for years to help pay for the implant upgrades. The new program will be effective December 1st. The money comes from the Saskatchewan Health Authority's budget. We're getting a better picture of how COVID-19 and other respiratory illnesses are affecting the province today. The Saskatchewan government released a report called the Community Respiratory Illness Surveillance Program, or CRISP. This report replaces the monthly COVID report previously released. It says overall respiratory viral activity is increasing in the province, but confirms COVID cases and deaths have slightly decreased. The Chief Medical Health Officer says the format has changed because there are more viruses circulating on top of COVID. The report shows COVID hospitalizations are steady at about 160 per week.
That's mostly people who are older in hospital with something else, but then get some additional COVID symptoms. So it's not the same as before, but certainly, wearing a mask, especially if you're older, have immune suppression, will help to keep our hospitalization numbers lower.
The report also says just less than 4% of Saskatchewan adults have received a bivalent booster so far. The province plans to release this new report bi-weekly instead of monthly. The number of families accessing the Regina Food Bank is growing. Food bank officials say the number of people accessing food compared to a year ago has jumped by nearly 60%. They say the pandemic, inflation, and higher food prices have changed the demographics of people who use the food bank.
I think the specific challenge the cost of living has created is again just a broadening of the type of folks that turn to the food bank for support. We haven't seen the sort of percentage of folks coming through that are actually employed full-time previously.
New Canadians such as Ukrainian refugees are also using the food bank in higher numbers than before. That's why the Regina Food Bank launched its Million Meal campaign in partnership with Mosaic today. It hopes to bring in food donations and cash to help feed more people. And people in Regina could soon be paying for their recycling and garbage bins in a new way. The city is bringing green bins for food and yard waste into the mix late next year. That's why it wants to change the way people pay for the types of waste they leave at the curb. A fee will be charged based on the size of the residents' garbage bins and other usage. Instead of being tagged onto property taxes, it's being recommended as a separate fee. The city will have to approve the idea, which is supposed to bring more transparency to cost and more service options. If approved, they'll come into effect January 1st, 2024. Well, if you can't hear the wind, you can certainly see it pushing things around out there. The sun was shining, but it was another very windy day across southern Saskatchewan. This is how things were shaking around in Saskatoon today. So when will it let up? Ethan will have the details in his forecast after the break. Stay with us.
This weather update is brought to you by Capital GMC Buick Cadillac. 22 model clear out is on now.
Our weather specialist Ethan Williams joins me now. The wind is starting to subside, but it's done some real damage over these past couple of days.
Yeah, that's right, Sam. Not only has it
blown things over and caused a bit of a mess. It's also fueled a fire near Weyburn yesterday afternoon. Now, it started northwest of the city near McTaggart, and with near zero visibility, travel was impacted on highways 13 and 39. One acreage was unfortunately lost in this blaze, but another one and a house thankfully able to be saved. A nearby home, as I just mentioned, thankfully saved as well. It's believed the fire traveled over 6 kilometers and did about $600,000 in damage, and crews were on scene until early this morning. Now, I spoke with the Weyburn fire chief this morning. He says there was a lot of help putting out the fire.
Had numerous locals with tractors and heavy equipment. The RM of Weyburn supplied a number of road graders. The city of Weyburn also had a number of road graders out here as well, working the fields, trying to contain the fire and prevent it from spreading.
And they are early in their investigation, but they believe it started in a nearby fire pit where farmers sometimes burn garbage. And much of the province seeing very high fire risk. In fact, that extreme risk now starting to creep eastward. Lots of fire bans in place now extending eastward as well, so be sure to check those out. Now, a windy few days. You've probably seen a few garbage cans or things like that tipped over. There is actually a mathematical formula, though, to take a look at how much wind you need to move things laterally from side to side. So something like a leaf, for instance, well, it doesn't take very much wind to move a leaf, not very much area, it doesn't weigh very much. Your garbage can, which has probably flown down the street maybe once or twice with this wind, takes up to 45 kilometers to get there. The average person, you only need about 107 kilometers of wind to actually move a person side to side. Can you believe that? But if you have a car, takes a little bit more. It takes about 145 kilometers. So if you're in Estevan, where you had a wind gust of 104 kilometers an hour yesterday, you just needed to stand outside and just stand there if you wanted to get somewhere, because the wind would just push you in that direction, basically. And that wind gust of 104 kilometers an hour was actually the highest October wind gust ever recorded in Estevan. It breaks the record that was set back in October of 1976. Regina, we had our second windiest October 12th yesterday, and really the entire province seeing gusts over 50 kilometers an hour. Here's a look at today, getting back up close to 100 kilometers in Estevan. Really, Weyburn, Regina, Moose Jaw, very gusty, but Saskatoon, there is a bit of a drop-off now happening, and in fact, wind warnings have come to an end, but it's still quite gusty at this hour, especially the further south and east you go in the province. And again, low pressure, the culprit here. Very gross day in Manitoba. They had snow in Winnipeg for the first time today. That system going to weaken another low developing. We could maybe see some rogue flurries in east central Saskatchewan tonight. Humboldt up toward Hudson Bay and Nipawin. We could also see some effects from this next low pressure system starting to move in, but I think we'll stay mostly dry, maybe just some cloud cover and lingering showers and flurries as we head through the day on Saturday. Wind gusts diminishing through the overnight hours. Tomorrow, we're looking at gusts close to 40 in the western part of the province. And then Saturday could be another breezy day again, but I think it'll be significantly less than what we've seen over these past 24 to 48 hours, and then they will diminish as we head through the rest of the weekend. Regina, normal this time of year, 11, and that is what we will get tomorrow. Mostly sunny conditions, and look at this, not too bad as we head through the rest of October here. Mid-teens is what we can expect, and Saskatoon, a similar picture as well. Saturday will be a little cool and windy, but if we can just make it through that, conditions will actually be not that bad at all. So I hope you have bolted down that garbage can, or maybe your car, Sam, because it's going to get a little bit windier still.
All right, thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
Stay with us. The Wind Math Man and I will be back after the break. A man from Ponoka, Alberta is dead after a stabbing rampage in Las Vegas while he was on vacation there last week. His wife was there with him at the time and could only watch as his life was abruptly taken. She says she is haunted by the unprovoked attack that has shocked the community and those here at home. Travis McEwen has the details.
Brent and Carmelita Hallett had been making memories recently. After the pandemic, the Central Alberta couple finally started traveling to countries they've wanted to visit for years.
We've always wanted to travel our whole lives, but we're just saving until we could. And then we just said, we're just going to do it now. And when we run out of money, then we'll go back to work.
Those plans came to a tragic end. Well, the two were in Vegas for a few months. It's the city where they married over 2 decades ago and have returned to dozens of times. But that Wednesday, a man armed with a large kitchen knife went on a stabbing spree outside of the Wynn Casino.
Initial stabbing occurs on the sidewalk area. It appears unprovoked. There is no altercation beforehand.
2 people were killed and 6 were injured. Hallett was one of the 2 who didn't survive. His wife says a man bumped into him as he ran by and was shocked to realize he had been stabbed in the back. She's thankful for 2 men who tried to help save him, but she feels like her life has been shattered after losing her partner of 28 years in an instant.
We were together so long that half of my brain is Brent and the other half is Carmelita. I can't separate us. We're the same. We were together for most of our life.
32-year-old Yoni Barrios has been charged with 2 counts of murder and 6 counts of attempted murder. Prosecutors will decide if he should face trial in a state court, which could potentially involve a death penalty. As for Hallett's widow, she's remembering her husband as a compassionate man who loved animals. She'll now be supporting animal charities in his honor. Travis McEwen, CBC News, Edmonton.
And our wind math man is back with one last look at tonight's weather.
Won't need that formula for too much longer, Sam. Looks like the winds are going to start diminishing through the night. In fact, they'll be only close to 30 at midnight in Regina. We'll be at 4 degrees under mostly clear skies. We'll see a little bit of cloud cover build back in tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. a degree, and we'll be at north winds close to 20 kilometers an hour. By the time we get to the noon hour, they really aren't increasing at all. We'll be 7 degrees, mostly sunny skies. Saskatoon, we'll see a little more cloud cover at midnight. Winds dropping off pretty quickly. And then look at this. By tomorrow morning, things clear out. We'll be at the freezing mark, but look, single digits when it comes to our wind gusts. Going to be very nice, and there's not really going to be much of an increase as we head to the noon hour. 9 degrees, Sam. Relief is in sight.
Thank goodness. Thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
And before we leave you tonight, some students in Regina got to spend time with a few of the Saskatchewan Rough Riders today. The players were at Sacred Heart Community School to talk about mental health. It was the kickoff to a program called Game Changers Playbook, a collection of curriculum-based mental health resources for schools.
Are you anxious? Sometimes nervous? Those types of things going on?
You look at our children, I believe, are the most resilient out of the whole COVID situation. Being in school, out of school, Zoom, being out of Zoom, being back in school, the resiliency that children have is unbelievable. And to be able to equip them with tools to understand what's going on in their life is just, it's unbelievable to have that opportunity to be able to help this province.
I call it box breathing. And sometimes just taking deep breaths can actually lower your heart rate and calm yourself down. So I'm gonna lead you guys through it right now.
These programs were not even on the radar. It was something that was not normal to talk about. I think as we climb year by year, we're finding different things that we're finding that it's okay to talk about. We open up about things that are going on in our lives. We open up about things that, what affect us. How can we give tools to be able to help youth?
I've been having mental problems for 2 years now, maybe almost 3. So during lockdown, it was pretty tough.
And just know that things are going to get better.
I'm just like every other person. I deal with things in my life that cause me trauma, that cause me stress, cause me anxiety. But how can I open up with the youth to be able to let them know you're not alone? It's just the fact that I'm, unfortunately to say it, larger than life. I'm not. I'm able to give you tools. I'm able to give you things that help me to be able to help you.
I feel a lot more reassured, let's say.
A great initiative. And that is it for us tonight. For news anytime, you can head to cbc.ca/sask or subscribe to the CBC Saskatchewan YouTube channel. Glenn Reed and Ethan will be back with more local news and weather tonight at 11. Thank you so much for watching and have a great night.